Officer Adam Lawson believed he was simply taking his wheelchair-bound father, a grieving veteran, to the Evergreen Animal Shelter to chase away the ghosts. But when they reached the final kennel, his world tilted on its axis. Inside, a scarred German Shepherd lunged a storm of fury against the bars until Adam drew near. Then the beast went still, dropping his head, and whined as if he'd seen a ghost from a past life. On its corroded collar, a lone word: Blitz, the very canine partner who'd been pronounced gone in a blazing canyon wreck 2 years prior. How could this dog be alive? Why did he disappear without a single trace? And could he possibly recall the man who once called him brother? The story that unfolds will break your heart, and then mend it with hope. Before we continue, please honor us by subscribing to our channel and leaving us a like. Your support is our bedrock, and we'd love to know where our story is reaching. Please drop your city in the comments below. From the depths of our hearts, thank you. A fresh blanket of snow was falling over Evergreen Valley, a soft and heavy whisper like a memory that would not let go. The roads vanished under a sheet of white, each roof shimmering dimly under the muted glow of an overcast Montana dawn. A solitary police cruiser cut through the slush, its wipers fighting a losing battle with the frost. Inside, Officer Adam Lawson, just 29, held the wheel with one hand, the other resting gently on the weathered grip of his father's wheelchair folded in the back. Adam was a man built tall and broad, shouldered, but strands of premature silver threaded his dark hair at the temples, a silent testament to a stress beyond his years. His navy blue sheriff's jacket was zipped to his chin, his badge offering only a dull gleam in the somber light. He carried the quiet burden of a man who had witnessed too much and said too little. The vacant passenger seat next to him was a hollow ache, a constant echo of his mother. In the back, 68-year-old Frank Lawson sat in silence. The old soldier's frame was wiry, etched by decades of service. A decorated Gulf War veteran, Frank once possessed a bearing of unyielding iron, but now confined to his chair, he looked diminished, as if folded inward by time. He wore an old olive, drab field jacket with ghosts of old patches, a wool cap tugged down low, and gloves that hid hands that shook ever so slightly from both age and sorrow. Since his wife Margaret's passing, that autumn silence had become a heavy third passenger in the car. Adam broke the quiet. "Dad, I heard this shelter took in a few rescues from the highway patrol. Thought maybe you'd want to see them?" Frank's gaze remained fixed on the passing gray. "Don't need a dog, son. What I need is your mother back." Adam's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "I know," he breathed, "but Mom, she wouldn't want you just sitting in that house all alone." The SUV turned into a gravel lot bordered by deep snow. A wooden sign read, "Evergreen Animal Shelter." Its blue paint flaking away like an old memory. The building itself was low and long, its windows clouded by the warmth inside. Faint, desperate barks echoed from within, sounding like a choir of abandoned hopes. Adam killed the engine, stepping into the biting cold to unfold the wheelchair by his father's door. Its tires crunched sharply on the ice as he helped Frank transfer. Snowflakes clung to the old man's cap, melting like silver tears on his weathered cheeks. "Let's just get this over with," Frank rasped. Inside, the air was thick with disinfectant and the scent of wet fur. The air, heavy yet warm, vibrated with the drone of overhead lights. Down the long corridor, a line of steel kennels, each one a silent plea for a new beginning. From a back room, a woman emerged, pushing a bucket. Dr. Emma Hayes, 32, stood tall, her auburn hair pulled back loosely, framing a kind face that held both compassion and exhaustion. A quilted vest covered her scrubs, a stethoscope hanging from her neck like a symbol of her quiet dedication. Her head lifted at the chime of the door. "Well, look what the storm blew in," she offered with a warm smile. "Welcome to Evergreen. Are you looking to adopt or just trying to stay warm? Adam managed a faint smile. Maybe both. This is my father, Frank. Emma gave the older man a respectful nod. Sir, we have a lot of good souls in here who would be honored to know a veteran, Frank scoffed. They're better off without me. But Emma's gentle smile never faded. Sometimes the broken pieces fit together. Her words hung in the air as she led them down the hall. Dogs barked, tails thumped, and paws scratched at steel doors. In every kennel, a pair of eyes begged for a moment of his time. Adam paused, now and then to offer a soft word, but Frank stared straight ahead, a ghost in the present. At the very end of the row, Emma stopped. This one, he's different, she said in a low voice. Inside the final cage sat a massive German shepherd. His coat was a matted tapestry of gray and sable. A scar split his left ear, his chest heaving with a tightly coiled tension. The dog's amber gaze instantly locked with Adam's. A low growl, a vibration of pure warning rumbled deep in his chest. Alive. Adam went rigid. That sound, it wasn't just familiar. It was a ghost from his past. Easy now, Emma murmured, staying back. He's been through the ringer. Showed up a few months back all bones and feral instinct. Wouldn't let a soul near him. Ranger found him on Elk Ridge after a storm. We call him Blitz. That name struck Adam like a jolt to his very core. His breath caught. Blitz, he repeated. K9 Unit 47. Emma frowned. You know him? Adam stepped, forward deaf to the warning growl. His gloved hand clenched the icy steel bars. He was my partner, he choked out. We lost him in the canyon 2 years ago. The vehicle went up before I could get to him. At the sound of his voice, Blitz's ears flickered. The growl dissolved into a broken whimper. The dog rose slowly, his eyes locked on Adam's face. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. No barks, no humming lights, just the silent, trembling shock of recognition. Blitz. Adam sank to his knees, his breath misting the cold steel separating them. It's me, boy. The shepherd took a hesitant step forward and pressed his wet nose against the bars. His tail gave one tentative flick, then another. As Adam reached out his hand, Blitz didn't recoil. He leaned into the touch. Emma watched her eyes soft. I'll be damned, she breathed. Frank wheeled forward, eyeing the dog with a soldier's critical gaze. You're telling me that animal was your partner? Adam could only nod, lost in disbelief. He saved my life, more than once. We all thought he died in that fire. Frank leaned in. Looks like fate wasn't done with you two. Emma knelt beside them. He's not ready for a normal adoption. Not for just anyone. PTSD, food aggression, all of it. But if you two have a history... Adam didn't hesitate. We'll take him. Frank's eyebrows shot up. We son, I didn't come here for... Adam faced him. Dad, look at him. He's one of us. He's been through it all. He walked out of that inferno alone. Maybe he's the one thing we both need. Frank opened his mouth to object, but the words died when Blitz met his gaze directly. The dog's stare was so steady it felt achingly human. Frank sighed, his shoulders slumping. Fine, he conceded. But if he touches my chair, he's your responsibility. Emma let out a soft chuckle. I'll handle the forms. You'll just need to sign a temporary foster agreement and bring him back for an evaluation in 30 days. As she stepped into her office, Adam stayed kneeling beside the cold metal cage. Blitz rested his head against the bars, and Adam gently stroked the matted fur between his ears. The faint, ghostly scent of ash still clung to the dog's coat. A phantom from that terrible canyon fire. Hey, partner, Adam whispered. Guess neither of us decided to stay buried. Outside, the snow fell thicker, a soft, relentless tapping against the glass. Frank watched the two of them, his expression, a mask, But his hands, those perpetually trembling hands, had gone perfectly still. A few minutes later, Emma returned with a clipboard. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked softly. Adam nodded. "He's family." When the latch clicked open, Blitz didn't run. He stepped out slowly, muscles tight, head bowed, as if crossing a sacred line back into a forgotten world. Adam clipped a new leash to his collar, guiding him toward the door. As they moved through the lobby, every other dog became utterly silent. Blitz's paws echoed on the tile, a measured cadence from another lifetime. Outside, the cold air hit them sharp and pure. Frank waited by the SUV as the ramp lowered. Blitz paused at the edge, his eyes shifting between the man and the seat. "You're not heavy," Adam said quietly. "I've carried far worse." Blitz then jumped encircling once, before curling up. His gaze stayed on Frank as if he could feel the man's fractured spirit. The ride home was silent. Just the hum of the tires and the sound of Blitz's slow, even breathing filled the void. Adam kept one hand on the wheel, the other near the dog's head, a silent promise that he was finally safe. As they turned onto Juniper Lane, the snow had become a delicate mist. The Lawson home stood at the end of the street, its porch light a fragile, flickering ember in the storm. Adam parked and opened the door. Blitz emerged, sniffing the air, his tail low but steady. Frank wheeled himself forward. He remembers," he murmured, as Blitz stopped by the porch steps to look back at them, waiting. Adam offered a faint, weary smile. "Yeah," he said. "He remembers what home is supposed to feel like." Crossing the threshold, the warmth of the house embraced them. From somewhere in the yard, a wind chime offered a single, clear note. Blitz walked a few steps into the living room and stopped right in front of the framed picture of Margaret on the mantel. He tilted his head, his ears flicking once, then settled onto the floor beneath it. Frank stared, his eyes glistening. "Looks like she finally has some company," he whispered. And for the first time in an age, Adam saw his father smile. That first night with Blitz was like treading on thin ice, hushed and uncertain, each sound amplified in the heavy darkness. The house on Juniper Lane had always been quiet, but now it held a new rhythm. The soft click of claws on the floorboards, the restless patrol of a dog still fighting a war in his head. Frank remained in the living room, his wheelchair pointed toward the fireplace. The amber light cast long dancing shadows across his deeply lined face, his old service jacket hanging loosely on his frame. Adam sat nearby, pretending to read the evening report on his phone, his eyes repeatedly drawn to Blitz, who remained utterly still on the rug, beneath the mantel. The dog's eyes were locked on the framed photograph of Margaret Lawson, Frank's departed wife. In it, the picture, she smiled, clutching a bouquet of lilacs, her hand gently resting upon Frank's shoulder. The German shepherd gazed at the image, a low, trembling sound escaping him. Not a growl, but a quiet whine, as if he recognized a glimmer of something in her face. Frank's knuckles whitened on his chair. "He's been doing that for 10 minutes. He murmured, his voice raspy with weariness. "What do you think he sees, son?" Adam closed his phone, placing it down. "Maybe just his reflection," he offered. But the sad droop of Blitz's ears told him it was something deeper. After dinner, plates of stew were finished, but one bowl sat untouched near Blitz. Adam gently coaxed him, but Blitz only sniffed it once and turned away, padding back toward the photograph. Frank sighed heavily. "You brought home a ghost," he mumbled. "Not a pet." Later, as the wind rattled the panes and sleet tapped the glass, a vigilant Blitz lay motionless by the door, his tail still, eyes half open. Adam was drifting off on the couch when it began. A sudden sharp crack echoed from fireworks far away. The dog's head shot up, ears twitching nervously. A second blast followed, much closer this time, and Blitz jolted upright with a choked bark. Before Adam could react, he lunged wildly towards the window, his claws scraping on the floorboards. He hit the wall hard, panting, his eyes wild, his whole body trembling. "Blitz!" Adam cried, leaping to his feet. But the dog couldn't hear him. He was back in that canyon, lost in the echoes of fire and twisted metal. His tail tucked low, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Crashing into a chair, he froze in the corner, growling at phantoms only he saw. Adam knelt down slowly, his voice steady yet gentle. "Hey buddy, it's me. You're safe now." He moved closer, letting Blitz smell his scent. When his hand finally touched the dog's fur, Blitz flinched, then leaned his head hard into Adam's shoulder. Adam wrapped both arms around him, feeling the tremors that shook the dog's powerful frame. "It's all over," he whispered. "You made it out." Frank had wheeled himself closer, the lines on his brow deepening with understanding. "He's not broken," he said softly. "He's remembering." Adam looked at his father. "What do you mean by that?" Frank's gaze was far away, lost in the flickering fire. "I've seen that look before. In Iraq, back in '91. We lost a man during a night raid. The next morning my buddy Tom just sat there. Just like that dog is now staring into space, jumping at every little sound. You can't train that away. You have to help him. Walk through it." He drew a slow, heavy breath, his voice low. "The mind never forgets what the body endured. It just buries it until a sound loud enough wakes it all back up." Adam listened, realizing his father had never spoken like this about the war before. The old man was always a closed book, a vault of buried memories. But now watching him, observe Blitz. Adam saw a flicker of shared understanding, like two veterans recognizing the same invisible scar. Frank nodded, toward the shaking dog. "He isn't weak. He's just like you were after the canyon. You both came home, but a part of you stayed." "Back there." The word struck Adam harder than he'd anticipated. He looked at Blitz, the smell of burning rubber flooding his memory, and fuel his partner's frantic screams on the radio, then the sudden deafening silence. He had buried that memory so deep, Night burying himself in work, pretending the duty could silence the ghosts. But here, in the fire's gentle glow, the truth settled, in his chest like cold ash. Blitz's breathing finally evened out his head, a dead weight on Adam's lap. Frank reached out, tracing a cautious hand down the dog's scarred back. "Easy now, soldier," he murmured low. "You're with your own kind here." The hours bled together as the storm outside softened to a whisper. Blitz was finally asleep, stretched out on the rug, his powerful body twitching with memories from a world Adam could only imagine. Frank let out a weary yawn, the exhaustion finally claiming him. "Guess he's staying," he muttered, turning his wheelchair towards the hall. "Your mother, she would have liked him. She always had a soft spot for the fighters, the ones who wouldn't quit." Adam managed a faint smile. Asterisk. Then he belongs here. Before heading to bed, Adam gently draped an old blanket over Blitz, leaving a single lamp on low. But sleep wouldn't come. All through the night he heard it. The restless shifting of paws on the floor, the quiet whimpers of a dog lost on some forgotten battlefield. By morning, Evergreen Valley was washed in a pale, fragile sunlight. Frost traced patterns on the windows, and the world felt almost new. Adam brewed coffee as Frank scanned the paper. The old man's face seemed lighter, though his voice still held that same gravelly edge. "Think he remembers you?" "I think he remembers everything," Adam answered softly. Blitz padded into the kitchen, his head still low, but his eyes were calmer. When Frank reached down, offering a piece of toast, the dog hesitated for a long moment, then gently took it from his fingers. It was a small victory, but it brought a real grin to Frank's face for the first time in weeks. As Adam got ready to leave for his shift, he paused at the door, watching his father and Blitz just sitting together in the quiet morning light. The radio played softly, some old country tune Margaret used to hum. For just a moment, Adam saw something that looked like peace. But as he stepped onto the porch, the rumble of a distant engine tore through the valley's silence. Inside, Blitz's ears shot up. His body went rigid, a low growl vibrating deep in his chest. Frank looked down, confused. "What is it, boy?" Blitz spun toward the window, tail stiff as a board, his eyes dark and watchful, as if something out there in the endless white had just called his name. Adam glanced back from the porch, a cold knot forming in his stomach. Maybe ghosts didn't stay in the canyons. Maybe some of them followed you home. The days that followed settled into a strange, fragile calm at the Lawson house. Blitz stopped growling at every little sound, though he still shied away from sudden movements and tight spaces. Adam was pulling longer hours at work, leaving Frank and Blitz to themselves. Most mornings, for a man who'd spent months talking to no one but the radio, the company felt strange at first. Frank would often wheel himself to the front window newspaper, unread in his lap, pretending to ignore the dog sitting by the door. And Blitz pretended not to notice him right back. It was their silent truce, broken only when Frank tried to get more. Coffee and a wheel caught the edge of the rug. The mug slipped from his grip, hot liquid splashing across the floor. He cursed under his breath, his hand fumbling for a towel on the counter. The sharp noise startled Blitz, who shot to his feet, his ears pinned back. Frank let out a heavy sigh. "You and me both, huh, pal?" He leaned forward, reaching for the towel, but the wheel slid on the wet tile. The chair tipped dangerously. Before he could grab the counter, his world tilted sideways and everything went dark. He collapsed, his body striking the floor with a hard thud. For an instant, everything went still. Then the sharp scrape of claws on tile. Blitz surged forward, paws skittering on the floor as he pushed himself against Frank's side, planting his feet. He wedged his warm body beneath the man's arm, a living brace trying to hoist him. Frank blinked, stunned. "Easy, boy. It's all right." Blitz refused to budge, his body shaking with the strain muscles, taut, his breathing ragged. Using the counter, Frank fought his way upright, the dog braced beside him the entire time. It was clumsy and difficult, but once Frank was finally settled back in his chair, Blitz let out a deep sigh and sat down right beside him, his tail giving a single solid thump. A hoarse chuckle escaped Frank. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered. "Didn't know you had it in. You..." For the first time since Margaret's funeral, his laughter held a note of truth. When Adam arrived home that afternoon, the scene that greeted him made him stop in his tracks. His father reading with Blitz sprawled protectively over his feet. The sight stunned him. "What happened here?" Frank never lifted his eyes from the page. "Your mutt decided he's a damn medic. Kept me from breaking something that won't mend." He gave Blitz's ear a soft tug. The dog didn't move an inch, but blinked perfectly content. "Guess there's more to him than meets the eye." Adam knelt. "Looks like he's found his person." Frank shrugged, trying to hide the smile on his lips. "Don't start. You know I'm not the sentimental type." Later that night, Blitz trailed Frank into the den, settling near his chair, as the old soldier tuned into the familiar static hiss of his late-night military broadcast. It was a time-honored ritual, Frank scanning the shortwave radio for faint, faraway signals, voices crackling from bases and ships an ocean away. The noise usually brought him peace, but tonight was different. Blitz lifted his head each time a man's voice broke through the speaker, tilting it. His brow creased as if he were searching for a familiar call. Frank reached down, rubbing the crown of his head. "You hearing ghosts in the static too?" he asked, softly. Blitz leaned into the touch, the weight of his head resting firmly on Frank's knee. 2 days later, Dr. Emma Hayes came by for a follow-up visit. She walked in wearing a maroon parka and wool scarf, her cheeks rosy from the biting wind, carrying a small medical bag. She smiled when Blitz met her at the door, instead of hiding. "Well now, that's definite progress," she said. Frank, seated nearby with a blanket across his lap, gave a courteous nod. "He's been behaving better than I anticipated. Saved my bacon the other day." Emma knelt inspecting Blitz's ears and paws. Looks like you've got a guardian now, Mr. Lawson. He seems much calmer around you. She offered Blitz a treat, which he took gently from her hand. You know, dogs with his kind of history sometimes connect with people who share a similar quiet. Maybe he senses a familiar spirit in you. Frank tilted his head. What are you saying? I'm a wounded animal. Emma smiled softly. Aren't we? All, sir. Adam chuckled softly from the doorway. You should have seen him the other night, like two old soldiers on. The watch! Frank rolled his eyes. Keep it up, son, and I'll sick him on your shiny badge. Emma chuckled quietly. I think he'd defend you before he'd ever do that. They spent the following hour going over Blitz's behavioral plan, consistent walks, gentle commands, no sudden sounds. When Emma finally gathered her things, Blitz followed her to the door, but stopped short, with a knowing glance back at Frank before she returned to his side. Emma saw it, and a gentle smile touched her lips. After Emma departed, the afternoon light bled into the bleak gray hush of winter. Adam had returned to the station, leaving, a father and his dog, alone in the silence once more. Frank wheeled himself onto the cold back porch, letting the sharp air sting his face. Blitz padded behind him, tail hanging low. You can come out, boy, Frank rasped. Not like I can chase you off. The porch overlooked the neighboring yard where the sound of a boy's laughter suddenly shattered the quiet. Frank turned his chair just in time to see Ricky Monroe, the 10-year-old who lived 2 houses down. The kid had sandy hair, a spray of freckles, and a cold metal brace on his right leg. He wore a huge red hoodie, using a set of crutches for balance as he heaved a snowball at a nearby tree. It missed, terribly dissolving into a fine powder. Afternoon, Mr. Lawson, Ricky called out, his breath fogging in the frigid air. That your dog? Frank gave a slow nod. That's Blitz. I'd keep my distance. He's still sorting out who's a friend and who isn't. Ricky just grinned. He looks like one of those K9 dogs. That's a cool name. He hobbled a few feet closer, leaning hard on his crutches. Can I pet him? Frank hesitated. Better not, he started to say, but Blitz had already stepped forward his ears, alert, his entire body rigid. A low warning growl rumbled deep in his chest. Ricky froze solid. Sorry, he mumbled, backing away. Frank tugged softly on the leash. Easy, Blitz, he's just a boy. The dog's fur bristled, but he finally broke his stance, sinking back down beside the chair. Frank sighed heavily. Guess he's still carrying some ghosts? Ricky nodded, a flash of disappointment in his eyes. It's okay, sir. My granddad's the same way. It just takes time. He offered a weak smile before limping back to his yard. When he vanished from sight, Frank looked down at Blitz. You're not making friends very easily, are you, pal? He said softly. Blitz looked up, and for just a second, Frank swore he saw guilt in those deep amber eyes. He leaned forward and rested his weathered hand on the dog's head. It's all right, I get it. The world is a loud place when you've seen too much. Later that evening, Adam came home to discover Blitz sleeping soundly by Frank's chair, his head resting on the old man's worn-out boot. Frank was dozing the radio, murmuring beside him. Adam didn't dare wake them. He just stood there in the doorway, watching the broken pair, a wounded soldier and a scarred K9, finding solace in their shared silence. Outside, the snow had begun to fall once more, blanketing the yard in a so-white hush. Across the fence, Ricky's faint laughter echoed through the darkness, completely unaware that the growling dog next door was already watching him in a new light, with less fear and more curiosity. And inside the Lawson house, for the first time in a long, long while, warmth had started to outnumber the ghosts. The snow had receded by the end of February, leaving only small, stubborn patches of ice across the Lawsons' yard. The days had grown longer now, though a chill still clung to the air like a persistent phantom. Frank now spent most mornings on the porch, a blanket draped across, his knees a mug of coffee steaming between his hands. Blitz would lie at his side, his head resting close to one of the wheelchairs, wheels. This had become their silent ritual, the man and the dog, both of them finding a quiet comfort in the rhythm of each, others breathing. By the second week, Frank started noticing the boy next door again. Ricky Monroe, 10 years old and small for his age, but overflowing with a stubborn determination, was always outside maneuvering on his crutches. His father was a truck, a mechanic swallowed by long hours out of town and rarely ever home. Ricky lived in the same red hoodie, every single day its sleeves frayed from constant wear. The metal brace on his right leg would catch the sun with a faint gleam. He was lonely, a fact Frank saw clear as day. But the boy had a light in him, a spark from before the world teaches you to build walls around your heart. Ricky began appearing at the fence after school, always clutching a small paper bag. "Hey, mister, Lawson." He'd call, his smile cutting through the cold afternoon air. "I brought something for Blitz. My mom baked these peanut butter cookies for our dog once, said they love 'em." Frank managed a faint smile. "That's kind, but this one, he's particular. Give it a shot, but don't get your fingers too close." Ricky just laughed, his breath painting little clouds on the air. He snapped a cookie in two, gently tossing a piece over the fence. Blitz rose to his feet, ears pricked, tail rigid. For a long moment he remained perfectly still. Then he moved slowly toward the cookie, sniffed it, and took it softly in his jaws without a single growl. Ricky clapped his hands. "See, he likes me already." "Don't get ahead of yourself, kid," Frank cautioned, but his voice held a warmth that had been missing for too long. For the next several days, Ricky returned like clockwork, always with that same paper bag. Some days it held pieces of hot dog, others slices of ham. He would sit cross-legged there in the snow, his crutches resting beside him, weaving stories for Blitz about school, his favorite comic books, and his dream of one day becoming a firefighter, even though his leg made running a battle. Blitz would just watch from a few feet away, his head cocked, his tail giving a rare flick, lost in thought. Frank would pretend to read, but the pages of his newspaper never turned. There was something mending in the sight of that boy speaking to a dog who had shut out the entire world. It filled the silence with a peace he hadn't known he'd lost. Then one afternoon, with the sun bleeding low, Ricky appeared, his limp a little more pronounced than usual. He propped his crutches on the fence, eased himself down, and pulled a small sandwich out of his pocket. "Mom says I should stop giving away food to your dog," he joked. "But she doesn't know that he's my best friend now." Blitz stood by the porch, hesitating. The wind carried Ricky's words so soft and so full of honesty. "You can come closer, you know. I'm not scared anymore." Frank looked up from his chair, a tightness seizing his chest. Blitz paused, then took a single careful step, then another. His claws clicked against the frozen earth. He stopped, right beside Ricky, settling down just close enough for the boy to reach him. Ricky went still, terrified of shattering the fragile trust. Then, ever so slowly, he extended his small hand. Blitz sniffed at his warm breath, clouding the cold air, and instead of recoiling, he gently pressed his head into Ricky's open palm. The boy's entire face lit up. "Hey, Blitz," he whispered. "You're not so scary after all." He ran his fingers through the thick fur. Blitz remained still, eyes half closed, just savoring the simple bite, gentle kindness. From his porch, Frank's vision blurred. He blinked hard, blaming the wind, but it wasn't the wind. What he was witnessing wasn't just a boy and his dog. It was a mirror of something far deeper. Two fractured spirits finding the courage to trust again. His mind flashed back to the desert. The deafening noise, the swirling chaos, and that one moment when a brother-in-arms pulled him from the wreckage that took his legs. "You're gonna make it home, Frank!" his friend had screamed. He'd yelled, and he'd made it. But his friend hadn't. That moment was etched into his very soul. And now, watching Ricky's hand gently rest on Blitz's head, the weight of his friend's words finally settled in his heart. Making it home wasn't just about surviving. It was about finding a way to live again. When Adam returned that evening, he found his father strangely silent, just gazing out the window. "You okay, Dad?" Frank nodded slowly. "The boy." He let him touch him. "Blitz." "Yeah." Frank's voice was thick with emotion. It was like watching two broken pieces of a single soul find their way back together. Adam smiled. "That's great news." Frank turned to him. "You ever think life gives you a second chance at the same moment, once to break you and once to heal you?" Adam's brow furrowed. "What do you mean by that?" Frank just shook his head. "Nothing. Just an old man's thoughts." The next morning, Adam poured a cup of coffee before his shift. A pale blue envelope lay waiting on the counter. It was stamped with the insignia of the State Police Association. Inside a formal invitation, the annual memorial service for fallen officers and K-9 units. Location Dead Man's Canyon. Adam's heart hammered against his ribs as he read the words. It had been 2 years, but the name still tasted of ash and regret. He folded the letter with deliberate care and slid it into his jacket pocket. Blitz, lying near the table, raised his head, his ears twitching as if he could hear the shift in Adam's very heartbeat. Frank noticed. "What's that?" "Just an invitation to a memorial," Adam said, his voice too casual. "For the canyon." Frank's eyes darkened. "You thinking about going?" "I don't know," Adam admitted. "I'm not sure Blitz could handle it." Frank took a sip of his coffee. Maybe that's exactly why he needs to go. Adam frowned. "You've seen how he is with loud noises. That place, it could shatter him. Or," Frank countered, "it might finally teach him he's not there anymore. Sometimes you have to walk back through the fire just to prove to yourself it's finally out." The conversation died there, but the words echoed in Adam's mind all day. At work. He couldn't escape the images. The canyon, the mangled steel, the roaring flames, Blitz's empty collar lying in the dirt. He tried to smother the memory with paperwork, but it clung to him like a ghost. That night, long after dinner, Adam found Blitz asleep by the couch. The dog's paws twitched in some unseen chase, and soft whimpers escaped, his throat ghosts of a forgotten battle. Adam knelt beside him, his hand stroking his back. "You want to go back there, boy?" he whispered. Blitz stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He nudged Adam's hand with his nose. In the silence, it felt like an answer. Meanwhile, in the house next, Dr. Ricky sat at his window watching the warm glow from the Lawsons' home. Through the darkness, he could just make out Blitz's silhouette against the curtain. "Good night, buddy," he whispered into the glass. "See you tomorrow." And inside, Frank switched off the radio, letting a peaceful silence fill the room. A silence punctuated only by Blitz's steady breathing. For the first time in so long, that sound wasn't an echo of what was lost. It was the rhythm of life itself. The morning of the memorial dawned a pale, fragile light spilling over the snow-dusted ridges of Evergreen Valley. Adam stood before the mirror, straightening the collar of his dark blue sheriff's uniform. His polished badge caught the faint light, but the man in the reflection carried a weight the uniform couldn't hide. In the kitchen, Frank was sipping coffee, already wearing his old formal jacket from the Veterans Association, its lapel dotted with a few service pins still clinging on. Material. Blitz was a shadow by the door, his eyes watchful, feeling the heavy silence in the room. Adam wavered. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready." He offered, his tone soft but unsure. Frank just shook his head. "Son, I've seen worse than a few speeches and folded flags. Besides, that dog's got his own story to tell, even if it's not in our words." At that, Blitz raised his head, his ears twitching at their voices as if he understood every last word. Adam knelt down next to him, clipping on the leash with a gentle touch. "You ready for this, buddy?" Blitz blinked slowly, then rested his muzzle on Adam's hand, quiet but certain. The drive out to Dead Man's Canyon stretched for almost an hour, twisting through tight roads where the snow still clung like ghosts to the pines. In the back, Blitz sat ramrod straight, his gaze locked on the horizon. Frank would glance back at him. "He knows," the old man murmured. "He knows exactly where we're going." Adam didn't respond. His knuckles went white. On the wheel, as the canyon's jagged mouth appeared through the trees, a deep dark scar carved into the mountainside where the wind never ever stopped crying. When they got there, rows of patrol cars already lined the small clearing. Officers in dress, uniforms stood at attention, their badges catching the pale sunlight. And among them was Dr. Emma Hayes, in a heavy gray coat, and a wool scarf, a camera resting against her chest. She'd volunteered to photograph the event. Her eyes found Adam as he climbed out of the truck, and she offered a small, supportive smile. "I wasn't sure you'd make it," she said softly. Adam managed a faint smile. "Neither was I." Her gaze softened as she saw Blitz hop down beside him. "He's looking better, stronger." "Some days are better than others," Adam admitted, "but he's fighting." Emma held out a hand, palm up, and Blitz sniffed her hand once, then leaned in just a fraction, a silent acceptance. "Good boy," she breathed. As the ceremony started, the crowd drew closer to the stone memorial, its face etched with the names of fallen officers and their K9 partners. The wind moaned through the canyon walls, a low hum that sounded like a long, mournful sigh. Adam and Frank found their places, near the front, with Blitz seated dutifully between them. The police chief, a tall man in his 50s named Harold Granger, approached the podium. He stood there in his full dress uniform, holding a folded page of notes. "We are gathered here today to honor the ones who gave everything in the line of duty he started, including those partners who never asked for a single medal. A word of praise, our K9 officers." While he spoke, Adam's eyes drifted to the stone. The engraved names seemed to shimmer, ghostly under a thin sheen of frost. His gaze caught on one inscription and his chest went tight. "Officer Mark Danner and K9 Blitz killed in action, 2023. Right beside him, Blitz went rigid, his eyes fixed on that same spot, his entire body pulled taut, a low whine vibrating in his throat. Adam felt the leash shake in his hand. Frank saw it. "Easy, boy," he whispered, placing a steadying hand on Blitz's back. But the dog couldn't relax. His breathing grew shallow, ears pinned back as the first echo of a lone trumpet began to haunt the canyon. The mournful sound of taps climbed into the cold air, each note bending softly against the wind. Adam dropped to one knee, getting down on Blitz's level. "We're okay, buddy," he murmured, his voice low, his gloved hand clenching the leather leash. "It's all over now." Blitz's gaze finally met his amber eyes holding something devastatingly human, a mix of grief, memory, and knowing. Then slowly the dog raised his head to the canyon rim and let out a long echoing howl shattered the silence. It began as a deep rumble, rising into a pure, haunting cry that carried through the canyon walls. That one sound stilled the crowd. The bugle choked mid-note. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Blitz stood tall, his chest heaving. His tail was motionless, his voice reverberating off the stone and returning like a sorrowful chorus from the mountains themselves. This wasn't a cry of fear or of pain. It was a final goodbye. As the howl faded, only the sound of the breeze whispering through the pines remained. Adam's throat went tight. He reached out to stroke Blitz's head, whispering, "Good boy. You did it." Frank quietly wiped a tear from the corner of his eye. "He isn't just saying goodbye to his partner," he said softly. "He's telling all of us it's time to come home." Emma raised her camera. Her hands trembled as she pressed the shutter. The image perfectly captured Blitz. Framed by the canyon, his head tilted to the sky. The monument behind him gleamed faintly. She slowly lowered her camera, her expression a mask of profound emotion. After the ceremony, people approached Adam, offering firm handshakes and quiet words of respect. One officer, Lieutenant Mason Price, a stocky man in his 40s with a trimmed beard and a kind face, clapped him on the shoulder. "That was one hell of a thing your dog did," he said. "More powerful than any speech could ever be." Adam nodded. "He says what words can't." Price chuckled softly. "If you ever consider re-registering him, I could pull a few strings. There's a therapy canine program. Starting up in Helena." "I'll think about it," Adam said, though his tone was heavy with the weight of his uncertainty. Meanwhile, Emma stood by the SUV, reviewing the photos on her camera. When Adam walked over, she turned the screen to him. "Look at this," she said quietly. The picture showed Blitz mid-howl, his powerful silhouette set against the pale canyon light. The emotion in his posture was undeniable, a stunning mixture of grief and grace. "I'm calling this one The Dog Who Remembered," Emma continued. "You should let me submit it to the Evergreen Gazette. People really need to see this." Frank, overhearing from his chair, nodded in agreement. "Do it," he urged. "This world could use a reminder that some hearts never stop serving." Adam hesitated for a long moment, then finally nodded. "All right, but make sure they know it wasn't, just a dog remembering. It was all of us." As they prepared to leave, Adam gently helped Frank into the car. Blitz sat quietly in the snow, staring into the canyon one last time as the wind brushed past. The breeze carried faint echoes of the trumpet's final, lingering notes. Adam crouched beside his old partner and whispered, "Tinu, he's proud of you, Blitz. Wherever he is right now, I know he heard you." Blitz lowered his head, pressing his nose into Adam's palm. He exhaled deeply, as if finally releasing the last of the ghosts that haunted him. When they drove away, Emma watched them disappear down the road, a swirl of snow in the SUV's wake. She glanced one more time toward the monument, whispering to herself, "Some goodbyes don't just end. They just turn into something beautiful." The next morning, the photo appeared online, shared by the local paper, with the headline, "The Dog Who Remembered, a canine's farewell that touched an entire town." Within hours, hundreds of people commented, thanking Adam and Blitz for reminding them of courage, loyalty, and a love that never truly dies. At the Lawson house, Frank sat on the porch with the paper. A newspaper lay folded in his lap, Blitz resting loyally at his feet. A quiet chuckle escaped him. "You're famous now, soldier." Blitz tilted his head, his tail brushing softly over the wooden floor. For the very first time, as the wind swept through the valley, it carried no ghosts, only tranquility. The week after the memorial slipped by quietly, like the profound silence that follows a great storm. It felt as if Evergreen Valley could finally exhale. The rooftop snow started to thaw, carving dark, wet trails across the shingles under the pale winter sun. Blitz was different after returning from Dead Man's Canyon. He slept deeper and ate, with a new calm, no longer recoiling from sudden sounds. But when darkness fell, he still walked his post, pacing the hall between Frank's door and the entrance, a silent guardian who could not stand down. Then one evening, Adam finally made it home from the station. A thin, treacherous sheet of black ice covered the roads where the day's melt had frozen over. He pulled up next to the porch, the living room light glowing softly through the window shades. Inside, Frank was reading a battered, dog-eared copy of The Old Man and the Sea Glasses perched low on his nose. Blitz was sprawled out near the window, his heavy head on his paws. As Adam stepped through the door, Blitz briefly lifted his head, then settled down again once. He caught his scent. "Keeping late hours," Adam noted, hanging up his coat. Frank smirked. "Old guys don't need much sleep. We just take naps in shifts." Adam chuckled, pouring himself some coffee. The house smelled of pine and the warm stew Frank had prepared earlier. It felt like a true home once more, alive and no longer haunted by grief. But that fragile peace was destined to be shattered. Around 2 a.m, the wind began to howl, crying through the cracks in the siding. The kitchen lights sputtered for a moment, then died completely. Frank shifted in his bed, the abrupt, total darkness yanking him from a deep sleep. Down the hall, Blitz's head shot up, his ears swiveling. A barely audible noise of metal gently scraping on. Glass cut through the oppressive silence. His eyes narrowed, his body tensing. Downstairs, a window frame groaned open, the distinct sound of boots grinding quietly on the frost-covered ground. A silhouette slipped through the darkness. A wiry man in his 30s, dressed in a dark hoodie and tattered jeans. His name was Kyle Dorsey, a local drifter who'd been robbing cabins throughout the valley for the past few weeks. He clutched a flashlight, its lens covered in red tape, its glow weak and thin. The intruder cursed under his breath, climbing through the window and snatching a silver watch from off the kitchen counter. Up above, Blitz's nostrils flared. He got to his feet silently by Frank's door, tail low, his muscles coiled. He moved down the hall with the ghostly precision of a military dog. The faintest creak of the floorboard beneath the intruder's boot was the final straw. Blitz growled, a deep, primal rumble that echoed in the dark like thunder rolling over stone. The man froze his light, frantically searching for the source of the sound. Blitz exploded out of the darkness. His bark shattered the silence, a raw, concussive force that seized the heart before the mind registers the threat. It was the first time anyone heard his voice since the blast in the canyon. Kyle scrambled backward into a table, sending a lamp smashing to the ground. Blitz sprang, knocking him completely flat with teeth bared, but holding back the bite. The terrified man screamed, covering his face. Blitz pinned his arm with one powerful paw, a deep growl in his chest. That sound ripped Frank from his sleep. "Blitz!" he cried out, his hand scrambling for his wheelchair. A tremor shook his voice, not from terror, but from the profound shock of what he was hearing. It was the sound of a soul returning. Blitz's bark echoed again, each call sharper, forged with purpose. Frank propelled himself into the hall, his eyes locking on the dark shape of the intruder, struggling violently under the dog's immense weight. "Good boy," he breathed. "Hold him." His hand stretched for the phone on the end table and called out hoarsely, "Adam, we've got an intruder." It took less than 3 minutes for Adam to answer the call. He'd just turned into the driveway back from a late dispatch call when his eyes caught the faintest flicker of movement inside the front window. His hand instinctively fell to his holster as he breached the door. "Police don't move," he commanded, his voice slicing through the chaos. Kyle froze mid-struggle, gasping for air. Blitz held his ground teeth bared, his eyes blazing in the harsh beam of Adam's flashlight. Adam moved with swift precision, cuffing the man and forcing him to his feet. "You picked the wrong house," Adam growled under his breath. Kyle's face was a mask of fear. "That dog's a monster. He almost tore me apart." Adam glanced at Blitz, who was still humming with raw adrenaline. "Believe me," he said softly. "If he'd wanted to, you wouldn't be breathing." With the intruder secured, Adam knelt beside Blitz. The dog's powerful chest rose and fell, but his eyes were finally calm, lucid in a way they hadn't been for so many months. "You okay, pal?" he whispered. Blitz gently pressed his nose against Adam's, shoulder his tail giving a single solid thump. Frank moved closer in his chair, his expression a mixture of pride and pure awe. "He barked," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I heard him. Did you hear that, son?" "He barked." Adam's own voice was thick with emotion. "Yeah, Dad, I heard." Frank looked over at Blitz, just shaking his head in wonder. "Sometimes," he said, "to get past the pain you have to remember who you really were." By morning, word was already spreading through town. Deputy Mason Price stopped by to process the scene and take Kyle Dorsey into custody. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with kind eyes under the brim of his cap. "Heard what happened on the scanner?" he said, a wide grin on his face. "The old soldier and his war dog taking down a burglar. Huh, you two make one hell of a team?" Frank let out a soft chuckle. "He did all the work. I was just the supervisor." Price gave Blitz's head a cautious pat. "You are something else, pal. You ever want a job back on the force, I'm sure we could find a badge for you." Adam smirked. "He's retired, but I think he might have just found a new purpose." Later that afternoon, Dr. Emma Hayes came by, having seen the report online. She had on a navy coat, snowflakes dusting her auburn hair, and she carried a folded newspaper. "Have you seen this yet?" she asked, offering it to Adam. On the front page of the Evergreen Gazette, right under the headline, "Veteran and his forgotten K-9 partner save each other from the dark," was a picture of Blitz sitting proudly beside Frank's wheelchair. "Totter Sioux," subheading declared, "Once shattered by war, both man and dog find their voice again." Frank stared down at the paper for a long, silent moment, his eyes growing misty. "They make it sound a whole lot prettier than it was," he said, his voice holding a rare softness. Emma gave a gentle smile. "Sometimes pretty is exactly what people need." That evening, as the sun bled out behind the mountains, Adam stood on the porch with Blitz. The dog gazed out across the quiet street, the very same one he used to patrol with Adam all those years ago. "You did real good last night," Adam said softly. "That bark, that sounded like you again." Blitz's tail gave a single slow wag, then laid his head on Adam's leg. From inside, Frank's voice drifted through the door, humming that very same old tune of Margaret's. For the first time, it didn't sting with pain. It was a comfort. And when the wind rose that night, it no longer rattled the house or woke the ghosts in Blitz's dreams. It simply carried the echo of that one triumphant bark, a reminder that some silences are meant to be shattered. The newspaper story about Blitz spread like wildfire. In just days, messages started pouring into the Lawson home. Letters from vets, police officers, and even children who saw the photo of Blitz beside Frank's wheelchair. Words of hope, healing, and thanks filled the envelopes. For Frank, it felt so humbling, almost surreal. He'd spent so long hiding from the world, only to find his quiet life with one broken dog had somehow managed to touch so many other hearts. A week later, Dr. Emma Hayes paid another visit. She wore a thick green parka over her, scrubs her hair tucked under a wool beanie. Her cheeks were pink from the biting cold, but her smile was so warm. Blitz ran to greet her, his tail wagging softly. "He's looking great," she said, kneeling to rub behind his ears. "Our little hero," Adam chuckled, leaning on the porch railing. "He's been milking that title for extra treats all week." Emma smiled before turning serious. "Actually, I came to discuss something." She handed Frank a brochure titled Therapy Companions for Veterans. "It's a program at the Evergreen Community Center. They pair trained dogs with veterans facing trauma or loneliness. Blitz already fits the profile. I think he and you might be just perfect for it." Frank stared, scanning the pamphlet. "Therapy dogs, huh? You mean just letting strangers pet him?" Emma laughed softly. "It's more than that. These sessions help veterans reconnect, some haven't spoken, to a soul in years. And I've seen how Blitz is around people who are hurting. He listens, Frank. He doesn't just sit there." Adam placed a firm hand on his father's shoulder. "It might be good for you both." Frank sighed. "Guess it couldn't hurt to try." The following Tuesday, they arrived at the Evergreen Community Center. The air smelled faintly of coffee and floor wax. Posters lined the walls showing smiling veterans with their service dogs. Inside the main hall, about a dozen folks sat in a semicircle. Some were young, others gray-haired and slow-moving. One man, Harold Hank Murdoch, wore a faded Marine jacket and held a cane in his left hand. Another, Linda Carver, a woman in her late 50s with close-cropped hair and a prosthetic leg, sat beside a golden retriever that kept nudging her hand. Frank wheeled himself in, feeling self-conscious under all the curious gazes. Blitz stayed close, calm, but so alert. Emma met them halfway, clipboard ready. "You'll sit right here, Frank. Let Blitz settle in." The first session started, awkwardly. A counselor doctor, Renee Walker, a gentle woman in her 40s with calm gray eyes and a voice as soft as snow, encouraged everyone to introduce themselves. "We're not here to talk about war," she said. "We're here to talk about what helps us keep going." When Frank's turn came, he paused. "Frank Lawson, Army, veteran, been retired longer than I'd like to admit. And this is Blitz. He's been through some battles too." He glanced down. Blitz gazed up, a silent understanding passing between them. I guess we both needed a reason to come out of the shadows. A heavy silence hung in the air. Then Hank let out a soft chuckle. "Well, that's about as good a reason as any." As the session unfolded, Blitz became the room's quiet anchor, its center of gravity. One by one, the veterans were drawn to him, their initial hesitation melting away. Then, with an unspoken need, Linda knelt, stroking his neck, her whispered words causing her own eyes to glisten with unshed tears. Another soldier, silent for the entire session, reached out with his prosthetic hand, a ghost of a smile appearing as Blitz gently rested his muzzle softly against it. By the end of that hour, a change was visible in Frank. The rigid armor he wore on his shoulders had begun to soften. When the counselor thanked him for sharing Blitz, he just nodded, unable to suppress the faint smile that tugged at the corner of his lips. In the weeks that followed, their visits became a ritual. Every Thursday, Frank would wheel himself in with Blitz right there by his side. Blitz developed an intuition, a sixth sense for pain. He would press against a trembling knee or gently lay his head in a shaking hand. And Frank started to open up, sharing ghosts of his unit, echoes of laughter under desert stars, and of how he lost Margaret only to find a reason to face the dawn again in the unwavering loyalty of a dog who refused to give up on him. One afternoon, the center hosted an open event they called Healing Hands Day, inviting families and the community to witness the progress these veterans and their companions had made. The main hall was adorned with flags and garlands, and a couple of local reporters from the Evergreen Herald were there to cover it all. Adam arrived straight from the sheriff's office, his uniform still on his boots, squeaking on the floor from the winter slush outside. He found Emma arranging chairs near the front and went to lend a hand. "You didn't have to come?" she said, smiling up at him. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Adam replied. "Besides, I heard the star of the show is a four-legged celebrity." As the seats began to fill, Dr. Walker took the microphone. "Before we begin, I want to share one story that truly captures what this entire program is really about. It's the story of a man who was sure his best days were gone, and of a dog who had forgotten how to truly live. Together, they reminded us all that no one heals alone." Frank wheeled himself forward, Blitz padding faithfully beside him. A hush fell over the room. Blitz sat a steadfast shadow at his side as Frank surveyed the crowd. His hands trembled, ever so slightly, on the wheels of his chair, but when he spoke, his voice was firm. "I spent a long time thinking my life was over. Lost my wife, lost my legs, lost the man I was. Then this dog showed up. A dog who'd seen too much of the wrong things. Just like me. We didn't fix each other overnight. We just kept showing up. For each other. Sometimes that's all healing is." He reached down, patting Blitz's head. The dog then lifted a paw, placing it gently on Frank's knee. That simple act sent a collective, heartfelt murmur through the audience. Someone in the back started clapping, then another joined in until the entire room was rising to its feet. Emma stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes shimmering. Adam, right beside her, whispered, "He hasn't spoken like that in all these years." "Neither has Blitz," Emma replied softly. "They've finally learned to speak the same language." Later, as the crowd began to thin, Adam and Emma helped Frank make his way back toward the van. "You did good, Dad," Adam said, a proud smile on his face. Frank grinned. "Not bad for an old soldier and his dog." He then looked at Emma. "You were right, Doc. I guess healing is contagious after all." Emma laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." While they loaded their gear, a reporter approached a young woman with dark, tumbling curls and a notepad held under her arm. "Mr. Lawson," she asked, "can I quote you on what you said about showing up?" Frank nodded. "Sure, just get Blitz's name right." That evening, as the family sat together for their meal, Adam saw a change in his father's face. It was lighter somehow. Freer. Blitz dozed near the fireplace, his paws twitching in his sleep while Frank hummed softly the same melody Margaret once loved. Outside, snow began its descent, again soft and silent as if the world itself had decided on a fresh start. By the time late March arrived, the snow had melted into gentle streams carving paths down Evergreen Valley's hills. The air held the subtle scent of pine and damp, earth a fragrance that whispered of spring's arrival. The Lawson home rested quietly under the first expanse of clear blue sky in months. Blitz lay stretched out on the porch, his head resting peacefully on Frank's lap. The old man sat wrapped in a thick wool blanket, his wheelchair angled just right to catch the warm sunlight. A radio on the porch table crackled softly, playing an old barracks tune he hadn't heard since his 20s. Frank hummed along, his fingers tapping lightly against Blitz's back. "You remember this one, pal?" he murmured. Blitz's ears flickered, his eyes half closed in pure contentment. The dog's breathing fell into the rhythm of the music, slow, steady, and certain. Inside, Adam was busy, driving nails into a wooden plaque as Emma Hayes gently brushed away the fine sawdust. They had been working together for hours, crafting a memorial destined for the edge of the property, a simple stone encircled by cedar posts engraved to honor the fallen K9s and their partners. It was Emma's idea, but Adam had insisted on doing the labor himself. For them, he'd said, and for Blitz. Ricky Monroe sat on the steps nearby, his crutch leaning against the railing. The boy's confidence had grown these past few months. The limp remained, but his smile was brighter now, no longer hidden. He wore a baseball cap, Blitz's name crudely stitched on the front, a gift he had made himself with his mom's sewing kit. "Are we almost done?" he asked. "Blitz is getting bored watching us." I chuckled. "He's supervising, big difference." Emma grinned, handing Ricky a small paintbrush. "Then our supervisor deserves the finishing touch. Want to help us with the letters?" Together, they painted the final line in bold, reverent strokes. They never left us. They simply found their way home. When they finished, Adam stepped back and just stared at the words. The sunlight struck the gold paint, making it shine against the dark stone. "Perfect," he said quietly. Frank wheeled himself closer, Blitz trotting alongside. The old man looked down at the plaque, his eyes tracing each letter as if it were a prayer. "You did good, son," he said, his voice thick with pride. "For all of them." Adam nodded, swallowing hard. "It isn't just for them, Dad. It's for you too. And for Mom." Frank smiled faintly, his gaze softening. "Your mother would have loved this. She had a real soft spot for heroes, especially the furry ones." Blitz barked just once, his tail thumping the ground. The sound made everyone laugh, the kind of laughter that comes so easily after a long winter of silence. Later they gathered on the porch as the afternoon sun dipped, lower, bathing the world in gold. Emma filled tin cups with steaming tea as Ricky casually tossed a ball to Blitz, who feigned indifference until the boy glanced away, then seized it with a triumphant pounce, trotting it back. Frank let out a soft chuckle. Such a show-off. Emma settled beside Adam on the porch rail. An unspoken warmth flowed between them, quiet yet undeniable. "He's truly happy," she murmured, her gaze on Blitz resting his head in Ricky's lap. "Yeah," Adam whispered back. "I think we all are." Frank leaned forward, his hand covering his son's. "You know, I always thought home was just a building, a roof, and 4 walls." His eyes welled with tears as he looked from Adam to Emma and then down at Blitz. But it isn't. It's the souls you find. Your way back home too, so thank you, son. And thank you, Blitz. You both brought me back to mine. Adam remained silent. He just squeezed his father's hand, a simple touch that conveyed more than words ever could. As the sky above deepened into amber, a familiar melody drifted from the radio, a soft instrumental march from a time long past. The sound floated on the evening air, embracing them like a memory that had finally lost its sting. Blitz stirred lifting, his head listening intently. His ears swiveled toward the distant horizon, where remnants of snow still shimmered in the dying light. He rose with a quiet grace, stepping from the porch to stand in the yard as sunlight spilled across his coat. For a fleeting moment his silhouette grew long and dark, a shadow of the dog he once was and the hero he had become. Ricky watched in awe. "He looks like he's on guard," he whispered. A faint smile touched Frank's lips. "He's guarding everything that matters." Blitz turned to face them, his tail swaying gently, his eyes serene and clear. He then padded over to Frank's chair, resting his head softly upon the old man's knee. The moment hung suspended in time, as fragile and perfect as the final lingering note of a beloved song. The sun dipped below the towering pines, painting the porch with long golden strokes. Silence returned, not the crushing weight of grief, but the tranquil stillness that follows a long-awaited healing. Frank closed his eyes. His hand settled on Blitz's head. "We're home now," he breathed. "All of us." With one last crackle, the radio's song dissolved into static. The wind stirred, carrying the distant sounds of laughter, a happy bark, and life itself. Proof that what was once shattered could still be made whole again. As twilight settled, Blitz lay again by Frank's chair, eyes half closed, feeling the warmth of the home at his back and the soft murmur of his family all around. For the first time in so long, no ghosts haunted his dreams, only the peaceful rhythm of hearts that had finally found their way home. Sometimes the greatest miracles aren't announced with thunder or voices from above. They arrive quietly in the unwavering love of a loyal dog, the embrace of a family, and the profound courage it takes to forgive ourselves. Blitz was more than a K9 hero. He was a reminder that even the most shattered spirits can be mended when faith and kindness guide the way. In the rush of our own lives, we so often overlook the smallest blessings, a stranger's unexpected smile, a pet's devotion, the solace found in someone who simply listens. Yet these are the gentle whispers from above, calling us back home to hope, to compassion, and to love. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen in ordinary moments. With open and humbled hearts. Tell us below which part of their story moved you to tears. And if you believe that love is truly eternal, that a broken spirit can heal, and God watches over every living soul, please type Amen in the comments. May God's grace be with you, and may every wounded spirit find its path back home, just like our hero Blitz.